The Architecture of Ambition: Deconstructing the Motivation Hacker. There's a fundamental truth about human potential that most of us learn far too late in life. You are not born with a fixed amount of discipline. Motivation is not a finite resource you're given at birth, like the color of your eyes. It is a system that can be understood, manipulated, and engineered to achieve almost anything you can imagine. Yet millions of people wake up every day feeling like passengers in their own lives, their dreams gathering dust on a shelf while they attend to the urgent, the mundane, the obligations set by others. They feel a deep, nagging sense of a protagonist license that has expired, leaving them as side characters in their own story. This isn't a story about failure. It's a story about a hidden blueprint, a story about a man who treated his own life as the ultimate laboratory, and in doing so, discovered a universal code for unlocking human drive. His name is Nick Winter. You might not know him as a household name in self-help, and that's precisely why his story is so powerful. Nick isn't a guru on a mountaintop. He's a programmer, an entrepreneur, the co-founder of a successful startup called Skritter, a tool to help people learn Chinese and Japanese characters. He is, by his own admission, a geek, a hacker. And like any good hacker, when he saw a system that wasn't working, in this case his own motivation, he didn't just accept it. He decided to break it down, understand its rules, and rewrite them to his advantage. This audiobook summary delves into his magnum opus of self-experimentation, The Motivation Hacker, a book he wrote not after his success, but as the very engine of it. In this detailed summary, we will embark on a journey through the core of Nick's discoveries. We will dismantle the machine of motivation to see how it truly works. We'll uncover the elegant and devastatingly simple equation that governs your drive. We'll learn about a technique so powerful for building confidence that it can feel like cheating at life, called success spirals. We'll explore the art of pre-commitment, a way to make your future self do your bidding, and we'll arm ourselves with an arsenal of practical, actionable strategies to conquer procrastination, learn any skill, and transform dreaded chores into engaging challenges. This is not just a summary, it's a field guide to becoming the hero of your own story, starting today. Are you ready to discover the code? The spark of a protagonist. Our story begins where many modern stories do, on a flight, suspended between a past life and a future promise. Nick Winter was flying from Pittsburgh to Silicon Valley, not just changing locations, but attempting to change the very fabric of his existence. He had spent the last 3 months in a ruthless, single-minded work marathon, writing code for 717 hours to finish his startup's iPhone app. His life had become a monolith of work. Adventures, zero, spontaneity, coded out of existence. He felt a rising panic, a sense that he had let his protagonist license expire. Have you ever felt that? That creeping realization that the story you're living isn't the one you'd choose to read? Nick was landing in a new home, a human hacker house, with friends dedicated to life optimization. He was terrified that his old habits, his work-obsessed, vampiric existence of escaping into video games and news forums, would simply fill the new space he was moving into. He needed a radical plan, something to shatter the old mold completely. And here's where the first hint of the hacker mindset appears. Instead of a gradual change, he concocted an amusingly implausible idea. What if he tried to do everything he'd always wanted to do, all at once, in just 3 months, while writing a book about the entire experiment? It was audacious. It was borderline insane. It was the perfect plan. He didn't just want to train for a marathon. He wanted to go from running 5 miles to a full marathon in 3 months. He didn't just want to learn a few Chinese words. He aimed for 3,000 new ones. He wanted to increase his bench press by 60 pounds, learn to skateboard, learn to throw knives, go skydiving, read 20 books, and even learn to control his dreams. All of this while running his startup and launching a hit iPhone app. But how could one person possibly do all that? Nick knew the secret. It wasn't about time, it was about motivation. And he knew motivation could be engineered. He decided he would max out his drive using every trick he knew, with two being the most important. First, telling everyone he was doing this insane project and writing a book about it. And second, setting a strict time limit. 3 months. The clock was ticking. This wasn't just a to-do list. This was a declaration of war against mediocrity. This was Nick Winter deciding to seize the pen and write himself back into the lead role of his own life. The motivation equation. Cracking the code of desire. Before you can build a skyscraper, you need to understand the laws of physics. Before you can hack your motivation, you must understand the laws that govern it. This is where most self-help falls apart. It gives you tactics without the fundamental theory. It's like trying to cook by randomly throwing ingredients in a pot. Nick Winter introduces us to the theory, the elegant formula that underpins our every action or inaction. It's called the motivation equation. He remembers it with the acronym MEVID. The equation looks like this. Motivation, shocks, expectancy x value. Impulsiveness x delay. Let that sink in. Your entire drive, your fire, your get up and go can be quantified by these 4 simple variables. This isn't just a nice idea. It's based on extensive research in a field called temporal motivation theory. And once you understand it, you hold the keys to the kingdom. You stop being a victim of your moods and start being the architect of your ambition. So, let's break it down. What are these 4 forces that secretly run your life? First, there's expectancy. This is your confidence of success. It's your core belief about whether you can actually do the thing. When expectancy is high, when you know you can win, motivation soars. But when you think you'll probably fail, even if you try your best, your motivation plummets. Think about a task you're truly good at. Don't you feel a little thrill at the thought of doing it? Now think about something you've failed at repeatedly. Can you feel that heavy, why bother feeling? That's expectancy at work. Next up is value. This is the reward. It's composed of 2 things: how much you enjoy the process itself and how important the end result is to you. Working on goals that light you up, that feel meaningful, generates massive motivation. But being forced to do boring, pointless tasks, that's a motivation killer. It's the difference between playing your favorite sport and filling out your tax forms. Both require effort, but one fills you with energy while the other drains it. Now we move to the denominator, the motivation killers. The first is impulsiveness. Think of this as your distractibility. It's a measure of how likely you are to get sidetracked by a more immediate temptation. When you're trying to work, but your phone is buzzing with notifications, your impulsiveness is high. Your motivation to work is low, because the shiny object is right there. But if you're in an environment with 0 distractions, where the only thing to do is your task, impulsiveness is low, and your motivation to do that one thing skyrockets. Finally, there's delay. This is how far away the reward seems. Our brains are hardwired to value the present far more than the future. This is a psychological bias called hyperbolic discounting. A pizza right now feels more valuable than being healthy in a year. A paycheck at the end of the month feels more real than a comfortable retirement in 30 years. The longer the delay, the smaller the reward feels, and the lower your motivation becomes. Riesci a capire quanto sia importante? These aren't just abstract concepts. They are the 4 dials you can turn to control your level of motivation for any task in your life. To increase motivation, you either increase the top of the equation, expectancy and value, or you decrease the bottom, impulsiveness and delay. It's that simple, and it's that profound. Think about the classic example Nick provides, the graduate student. Working on her dissertation, her motivation is in the gutter. Why? Let's use the equation. Her expectancy is low. She knows only 57% of students finish their PhD in 10 years, and she's already struggling. The value is uncertain. She's not even sure she wants the job the PhD will lead to, and writing academic papers is a bore. Her impulsiveness is through the roof. Her friends are all procrastinating too, inviting her to do fun, exciting things instead of facing the dissertation. And the delay? The reward is years away, an eternity in brain time. Motivation is practically zero. But here's the fascinating part. That same student is bursting with motivation for her side project, a silly web game she's building with friends. Same person, completely different motivational state. Why? Let's check the dials. For the game, her expectancy is high. She knows she can build it, and her friends are cheering her on. The value is immense. It's fun to code, and players love every new feature she adds. Her impulsiveness is low. This is the project everyone wants her to work on, and the delay is tiny. She releases improvements and gets positive feedback almost immediately. Do you see it now? The problem was never her. It was the environment. It was the structure of the task. She didn't lack willpower. She lacked a well-designed motivational structure. And this is the central, liberating idea of the motivation hacker. You can stop blaming yourself and start redesigning your environment. You can become an architect of your own drive. Part 1. Success spirals. The unstoppable momentum of winning. Now that we have the blueprint, the motivation equation, it's time to look at the first master tool. And this one is a game changer. It's a technique designed to attack the most fundamental part of the equation. Expectancy. Your confidence. Nick calls it the success spiral. What is the biggest lie we tell ourselves about our failures? We say things like, I'm just not a morning person. I'm bad at math. I can't stick to a diet. I'm too shy to talk to people. We diagnose ourselves with permanent conditions. But what if these aren't conditions? What if they are simply the result of a downward spiral? Think about it. You try something and fail. Your confidence takes a hit. So, the next time, you try a little less hard, because what's the point? You fail again. Your confidence sinks lower. Repeat this enough times, and you create what Nick calls a confidence pit. You become so certain of your inability that you stop trying altogether. You have learned to be helpless. I had learned to be helpless at 16 out of 23 classic low expectancy skills, Nick admits. He viewed himself as someone who couldn't sing, couldn't draw, couldn't be fashionable, couldn't cook, couldn't even talk to girls. But here's the beautiful, symmetrical truth. If failure can create a downward spiral, then success can create an upward one. Success begets confidence. Confidence fuels more motivation. Motivation leads to more success. And soon, you find yourself on a rising staircase, climbing higher and higher, until the person you used to be is just a speck on the ground below. That is a success spiral. And you can build one intentionally. So, how do you do it? How do you start this upward climb, especially if you're at the bottom of a pit? The secret is to start small. Ridiculously small. The most difficult and important part of starting a success spiral is starting small enough that it's trivial to succeed. Here's the method. First, you pick a tiny, achievable goal, something you cannot fail at. Not, go to the gym for an hour, but put on your gym shoes. Not write 1,000 words, but write one sentence. My mom, a professional writer, Nick shares, has a rule. You have to write 4 sentences a day. Hangover, head cold, Christmas, whatever. The beauty of such a tiny goal is it gets you in. Second, you must track your success. This is non-negotiable. You need a visual record of your wins. A spreadsheet, a notebook, an app, it doesn't matter. What matters is that at the end of the day, you get to mark a W. You get that little dopamine hit of victory. This tracking system becomes your reminder and your proof. Third, you need a completion date. You can't succeed at doing something forever. Life changes, so you set a time limit. I will do this for 30 days. I will meditate every day for 2 weeks. At the end, the goal is complete. You have officially succeeded. You can then choose to re-up, make it harder, or move on. But that initial victory is logged. It's in the bank. The most important rule: you can never, ever weasel out. If the day comes and you don't feel like it, you do it anyway. This is where the tiny size of the goal is your secret weapon. You can always floss one tooth. You can always do one push-up. You can always write one word. By persevering, especially on the hard days, your expectancy doesn't just grow, it explodes. Nick put this to the test himself. When he decided to escape his work-only life, he set up a list of tiny goals. Study Chinese on Skritter for at least 1 second. Journal at least 1 word. Do at least 1 strength exercise, even if it's just an easy set of push-ups. The only truly hard goal was a social one. Go out and be social at least 5 days a week, because that was his biggest fear. And what happened? It worked. He overshot his targets on everything. In just a few weeks, these tiny actions turned into solid habits. He had never had such success with building habits before. The key, he realized, was focusing on input, do 1 minute of practice, instead of output, achieve a certain result. Some days the results sucked, but that didn't matter. He logged the effort, he got the win. The spiral started climbing. Does this sound too simple? Too easy? That's the entire point. The CAR method parallel is clear here. You've been led to believe that building discipline is a painful, heroic struggle. It's not. It's a simple mechanical process of stacking tiny guaranteed wins until your brain has no choice but to believe you are a person who succeeds. But there's a catch. A dark side to this powerful tool. Nick calls it the sword of last chance. This technique, the success spiral, is fragile. Each time you try and fail, each time you commit to a spiral and then fall off, it becomes harder to start again. A voice of doubt gets stronger, whispering, "You couldn't do it last time. Why would this time be any different?" Most of us are walking around with a graveyard of broken success spirals, abandoned gym memberships, half-read books, forgotten New Year's resolutions. So, how do you make sure this time is different? You have to convince yourself that this is it. This is your last chance. This isn't about being dramatic. It's a psychological tool for creating desperate effort. When you truly believe you have only 1 shot left to change, to become the person you want to be, you stop holding back. You go all in. You unleash a level of focus and commitment you didn't know you possessed. Nick knows this from personal experience. When he went to college, he was at the absolute bottom of a social anxiety pit. He told his friend, "In a week, I'll either be happy or dead." He was wielding the sword of last chance. He knew that if he couldn't pull his life together, then, in that new environment, he never would. This wasn't a casual attempt. It was a do-or-die mission. And it worked. This is the challenge this chapter leaves us with. It gives us a powerful weapon, but it demands respect. You have 3 choices. 1. You can swing the sword now. Make a plan so powerful, so filled with motivation hacks, that failure is not an option. 2. You can lock the sword away for a specific future date, committing now to act then, without fail. Or 3. You can throw it away, convinced that you don't need it. But as Nick warns, be careful. That feeling of "I don't need to try that hard" is often just another rationalization, another whisper from the part of your brain that wants to stay comfortable in the dark. It's time to decide. Are you ready to fight? Pre-commitment, forcing your future self to obey. If the success spiral is about building your belief in yourself, our next tool is about making belief irrelevant. It's for the moments when temptation is high and your future self cannot be trusted. It's called pre-commitment. What is pre-commitment? To pre-commit is to choose now to limit your options later. It's an agreement you make with your present self to protect you from your future self. It's you, the intelligent planner, setting a trap for you, the impulsive creature of the moment. This technique is a direct assault on the impulsiveness and delay variables in our equation. Think of Odysseus, who wanted to hear the siren's deadly song. He didn't rely on willpower, he pre-committed. He had his men tie him to the mast of his ship and plug their own ears with wax. He made it impossible to fail. That is pre-commitment in its purest form. But you don't need a ship and sirens to use this. You use it in small ways all the time. Not buying junk food at the grocery store is a pre-commitment against late-night snacking. Setting your alarm clock across the room is a pre-commitment against hitting the snooze button. But the motivation hacker takes this to a whole new level. Nick argues that you should bind yourself with stakes so high, so terrifying, that failure becomes unthinkable. It's not about motivating yourself with fear. It's about generating such an overwhelming certainty of success that the whole process becomes fun and exciting. Remember, when expectancy is high, motivation is high. By pre-committing with massive stakes, you make your success a near certainty, which skyrockets your expectancy. And what better case study for this than Nick's goal of going skydiving? Here was a man who was once so terrified of a kiddie roller coaster that he avoided them for 10 years. A man whose reaction to a high-speed ride was a face of pure, snot-crying terror. And now he had to jump out of a plane. He knew his fear would be immense. He knew that at the critical moment, with the plane door open, his willpower would abandon him. So, he built a cage of pre-commitment so strong it was inescapable. What did he do? First, the big one, money. He pledged $7,190 that he would skydive on or before a specific date. Not to a friend, but through a service that would actually take it. But that's not all. He layered on more commitments. 2, he told everyone. His girlfriend, his housemates, people at a party, his startup co-founders. He posted it on social media. He made a public declaration. 3, he wrote a whole chapter about it in the book before he did it. Backing out would mean rewriting a huge section and admitting failure in a book about success. 4, he had already paid for the ticket. 5, his girlfriend Chloe was counting on him. 6, he fixed the exact date so he couldn't use scheduling as an excuse. And what was the result of building this fortress of consequences? He says, "Now that I've pre-committed far more than necessary, I'm so sure that I'm going to successfully jump out of the plane that I'm not afraid anymore. I'm excited." Do you see the magic there? The pre-commitment was so powerful that it transformed terror into excitement. It hacked his brain's emotional response. But what about long-term goals? What about losing weight or writing a dissertation? A single do-or-die moment won't work. You need to make steady progress. And this is where we meet our next incredible tool, BeMinder. BeMinder is a web service that combines success spirals and pre-commitment for goals that require continuous effort. Think of it as a yellow brick road to your goal. You tell it your goal, e.g., lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks, and it creates a path for you to follow. Every day, you have to stay on or above that path. If you fall off, you have to pledge money, $5 the first time, then $10, then $30, tripling each time you fail. Now, follow this reasoning. This system masterfully manipulates the motivation equation. It kills delay by breaking a huge goal into tiny, daily steps. It increases expectancy by giving you a clear path and showing your progress with graphs. And it obliterates impulsiveness by attaching an immediate, painful consequence, losing money, to falling behind. Nick used BeMinder for almost everything in his project. To read 20 books, one every 4.5 days. To learn 3,000 Chinese words, 33 per day. To talk to 100 people, 7.7 new people a week. And for his biggest goals, writing the book and going skydiving, he didn't start at $5. He emailed the Beeminder crew and asked them to set his initial pledge at $7,290. That is how a motivation hacker thinks. He doesn't dip his toes in the water. He dives from the highest cliff. One final powerful form of pre-commitment Nick discusses is burning the ships. The name comes from the story of the conqueror Hernán Cortés, who supposedly burned his ships upon arriving in the New World, making retreat impossible for his men. The modern equivalent? For most of us, it's disconnecting the internet. Nick describes himself as an internet addict. He would try to limit his email checking, but would often fail. But when he started writing this book, he made a simple, brutal rule. Internet off when he went to bed, and it stayed off until after lunch. He describes his brain at first, jerking around, looking for its fix of email, news, or forums, but finding itself walled in. With nowhere to go, it settled down and focused. His writing speed increased dramatically. Why had it taken him so long to do something so simple and effective? Maybe the answer is just that addiction is hard to admit, he muses. This is the core of pre-commitment. It is an admission that our willpower is flawed and finite. And it is the wise strategy of taking the battle off the field of willpower and winning it on the field of planning. Hey there, do you like this audio summary? Then take 2 seconds of your time and click on subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. With this simple action, you will receive many more free high-quality summaries every single week. You can also send us your appreciation with a simple like on this video. Thank you, and let's go on. Part 2. The Social Zero, a case study in total transformation. Now we have the theory and the primary tools. But what does it look like when you have to use all of them at once? What happens when you face a goal so monumental, so terrifying, that it feels like your very life depends on it? A goal surrounded by what Nick calls an UG field, a mental force field that makes you flinch away from even thinking about the problem. This is where we come to the most personal, most powerful story in the book. It's the story of how Nick Winter used these principles to conquer a demon that had crippled him for years. It's the story of how he went from being what he calls a social zero to a confident, engaging human being. Let's set the scene. 18-year-old Nick. He has no friends his own age. He is so terrified of speaking to strangers that he would make his mother or brother order his food at Taco Bell. The telephone was an instrument of torture. He once went an entire day of high school without saying a single word to anyone. His life was a desperate escape into books, and most of all, the video game EverQuest, where he logged nearly a full year of playtime over 5 years. Let's analyze this with our equation. Expectancy was 0 for everything social. Value in trying was non-existent, only the certainty of pain. Impulsiveness was maxed out. He would always choose the escape of the game over the terror of reality. And the delay of any consequence was high. College was a distant, terrifying storm cloud he refused to think about. He had no motivation to save himself. So what was the spark? What could possibly break such a powerful negative feedback loop? It was a high school independent study in journaling. He was forced to write, to confront the disaster his life was becoming. He had to face the terror of going to college in 9 months, of being forever alone. In a moment of pure desperation, he made a decision. He decided that he would never change if he kept playing computer games. He quit. But how did he stick to it? He used the tools even before he had names for them. The journaling itself was a form of pre-commitment. For 9 months, he wrote about how he was going to change, how he would face his fears once he got to college. He was making a promise to his future self. He also used a burnt ship strategy. He told his family he was quitting EverQuest and uninstalled the game. It wasn't a perfect burn. He admits he should have sold his character to make it truly irreversible, but it was enough. And most importantly, he wielded the sword of last chance. He designated college as his do-or-die moment. "Once I get to college," became his mantra. He knew, with absolute certainty, that if he didn't change in that new environment, the old Nick would be with him forever. When he arrived at Oberlin College, the plan was put to the test. For 2 days he ate nothing but Reese's Cups because he was too afraid to ask where the cafeteria was. But then, fueled by 9 months of pre-commitment and the terror of his last chance, he forced himself to try. He managed a few small interactions, and then a breakthrough. He went for broke and confessed his entire story to a girl named Lauren. How he'd never been able to talk to anyone, how scared he was. He expected her to be weirded out, but she wasn't. She offered sympathy, warmth, a real conversation. And guess what happened? It was a revelation. People were nice. They invited him to eat with them. They didn't mind his shyness. He had just lit the fuse on his first social success spiral. Each new conversation, no matter how small, fed his courage for the next one. He took it slow, keeping his goals tiny, never risking a failure that could send him spiraling back down. And over the next 8 years, that shy, silent boy transformed. He's not the most social guy in the world, he says, but at his twin brothers and his co-founders' weddings, he delivered best man speeches that people told him were the greatest they had ever heard. From being unable to order a burrito to commanding a room. That is the power of hacking your motivation. But here's the kicker. It doesn't have to take 8 years. Now, armed with these techniques, you can accelerate the process. And Nick gives us a powerful exercise to do just that, a way to rapidly desensitize yourself to social fear. It's called rejection therapy. The premise is simple, yet terrifying. You expose yourself to the thing you fear, rejection, over and over again, until your brain instinctively learns that it's not going to kill you. Nick and some friends went downtown for 1 hour with a mission. Approach as many strangers as possible and make requests that were likely to be rejected. Can I take your picture? Will you tell me a secret? Can I have a free ice cream? May I ride in the bookmobile? And you'll never guess what they discovered. A surprising number of people said yes. He got the free ice cream. He didn't get a ride in the bookmobile, but the librarian he asked ended up telling him a ghost story about the library that he'd only ever shared with a few people. One of his friends asked for and received a jacket that turned out to be worth $150. In just 1 hour, they had reaped years of confidence. By the end of the hour, Nick had gone from terrified to mostly chill, a change that has stuck with him ever since. This is a perfect example of breaking a large, scary goal, become more confident, into a specific, actionable, time-boxed exercise. You can design exercises like this for almost any skill. Want to get over your discomfort with eye contact? Find a partner and stare into each other's eyes for 15 minutes. It's uncomfortable, but it works. The key is using pre-commitment to force yourself to do the exercise that your fear is telling you to avoid. Startup Man and the Art of Learning. Now, what happens when you apply these principles not just to a single goal, but to your entire working life? Nick uses his startup, Skritter, as the ultimate case study in creating a high motivation environment. A startup, he says, quoting the famous investor Paul Graham, is a way to compress your whole working life into a few years. You work insane hours not just because you have to, but because it's deeply, intrinsically rewarding. And why was it so motivating? Let's run it through the MeVid equation. Expectancy was high. They had committed fully, with no fallbacks. They were working with co-founders, so they could lift each other up during low points. And they were wildly overconfident, underestimating the difficulty, which Nick argues is a good thing. It gets you started on challenges you might otherwise shy away from. Value was off the charts. They were working for themselves, on something they found fun and meaningful. They were working for their users, getting a constant stream of positive feedback that fueled their hunger to do more. And they built a fun lifestyle around it, working from home, playing video games after dinner, and shielding each other from the tasks they hated. Impulsiveness was low. They created a work environment that afforded only work. They were in a small college town with few distractions. And they were surrounded by each other, all working hard towards a shared goal. It's hard to slack off when your best friend is in the same room, fighting for your shared destiny. And delay was short, at least psychologically. They were always almost there. Every new feature, every conference, felt like it could be the big break. This is the planning fallacy working in your favor. Because you underestimate how long things will take, the reward never feels that far away, keeping motivation high. But this perfect environment didn't last. When the team went remote, Nick's motivation plummeted. He was stalled on building the iPhone app, struggling to work even 20 hours a week. He had to consciously rebuild his motivation architecture from scratch. He put his work hours on Beeminder to build a success spiral. He ignored the boring bugs to focus on features that would get him user feedback faster, reducing delay. He used time boxing to control his impulsiveness, and slowly he rebuilt his drive, eventually working over 87 hours in a single, hyper-focused week to finish the app. This journey from unconscious high motivation to a conscious, engineered high motivation proves the point. Drive is a science. So, if you can engineer motivation for work, can you do it for learning anything? Absolutely. And this is where the book becomes a practical guide to skill acquisition. During his 3-month project, Nick set out to learn Chinese, knife throwing, skateboarding, lucid dreaming, and public speaking. The approach is always the same. First, get excited about a skill. Second, while you're excited, hack up the motivation to practice it using pre-commitment and success spirals. Third, learn how to practice effectively from a book or a teacher. And fourth, start right away. You see this pattern again and again. For knife throwing and skateboarding, he sucked at first, got a few tips from a friend, and then was hitting his goals within days. For public speaking, he used the trigger of 2 upcoming best man speeches to force himself to learn, prepare, and practice. For learning facts, he introduces us to another powerful tool, Spaced Repetition Systems, SRS, with his favorite program being Anki. And SRS is like digital flashcards on steroids. It learns how well you know something and then shows it to you at the perfect moment, right before you're about to forget it. It's an incredibly efficient way to download massive amounts of knowledge into your brain. But, as with all powerful tools, there's a common failure mode. People get behind on their reviews and are faced with a huge, discouraging mountain of overdue cards. They give up. And the motivation hacker's solution? It's simple. You don't set a goal to clear your reviews. You set a process-based goal. Spend 15 minutes a day on Anki. You use Beeminder to ensure you do it. You focus on the input, not the output, and let the knowledge accumulate automatically. You make it impossible to fail. The message is clear. Learning isn't about innate talent. It's about having a system to ensure you put in the time, and a method to ensure that time is spent effectively. With these 2 things, you can learn almost anything. Part 3, The Task Samurai and the Final Tally. We've covered the grand goals, the life-changing transformations, and the acquisition of impressive new skills. But what about the small stuff? The boring, necessary tasks that drain our energy and fill our days. The laundry, the dishes, the emails, the errands. How does a motivation hacker deal with the mundane? They become a task samurai. This isn't about just getting things done. It's about changing the nature of the task itself by injecting a different kind of value, the thrill of a challenge. Nick tells the story of the dwarves in The Hobbit who turned the drudgery of dishwashing into a spectacular, song-filled, dish-tossing game. That is the spirit of the task samurai. You don't just do a boring task, you find a way to make it a game. Tired and dirty from a workout, needing to shower but feeling drained? Don't just tell yourself to shower quickly. Challenge yourself to a new speed record. Nick's best time? 1 minute and 37 seconds from entering to exiting the bathroom, fully clothed. It sounds silly, but it works. It transforms a valueless task into a mini-game, giving you a shot of engagement and a sense of victory. Fill out tax forms with your most elegant handwriting. Time box your laundry and try to beat the clock. Floss your teeth with your eyes closed. Clean your room while listening to epic battle music. You are a Viking warrior, and this messy kitchen is your enemy. Go. Of course, another excellent strategy for valueless tasks is to simply not do them. This can involve batching them, doing all your errands once a week, paying someone else to do them, or trading them. Nick and his girlfriend Chloe, for instance, trade chores based on their preferences. I'll do the laundry. What will you trade me? Dinner? Deal. It's a simple application of economic principles to domestic life, creating value for both people out of thin air. This mindset of optimizing everything from grand life goals to the way you wash your dishes brings us to the final core principle of the motivation hacker. You make what you measure. We humans are notoriously bad at knowing what actually makes us happy or productive. We are run by what psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls the remembering self, a narrator in our heads that constructs stories about our lives which are often completely disconnected from our actual moment-to-moment experience. We think a sunny vacation made us happy, but we forget the stressful travel, the sunburn, and the boring afternoons. The remembering self just creates a highlight reel. The motivation hacker's solution is to bypass this flawed narrator and gather objective data. For 2 years, Nick randomly pinged himself 3 times a day to record his happiness on a 1-10 scale, along with tags for what he was doing. And the discoveries were surprising. He thought sunny weather was crucial to his happiness. The data showed it had almost no effect. He discovered that simply organizing his music collection to increase the density of songs he loved gave him a massive, sustained boost in overall happiness. This isn't just about happiness, it's about effectiveness. Are you trying a new diet? Track your weight and body fat. Don't just go by how you feel. Trying a new workout routine? Track your strength gains. Running these simple self-experiments does 2 things. It tells you what actually works, and the curiosity involved adds another layer of value and motivation to the process itself. So, after 3 months of wielding these tools, of living as a human guinea pig in the laboratory of his own life, what happened? Did this audacious, insane project actually work? Let's go through the missions. Skydiving? Mission accomplished. The over-the-top pre-commitment worked perfectly, turning terror into excitement, even if the experience itself was more nauseating than fun. Lucid dreaming? A resounding success. He went from having occasional, uncontrolled lucid dreams to having them weekly, accomplishing missions like teleporting, wrestling a centaur, and even pulling the moon down from the sky. Knife throwing and skateboarding? Success on both. He hit his accuracy goals and learned to travel 10 miles on a longboard, discovering 2 new fun skills. Write a book? Too successful. He finished the first draft in just 5 weeks, leaving him under-challenged for the rest of the project. A clear sign of how powerful the B-Minder and pre-commitment combination was. Learn 3,000 Chinese words? A perfect, machine-like success. 41 hours of study spread over 3 months resulted in 3 as 5 new words learned with 92% retention. A testament to the power of SRS and consistent tracked effort. Read 20 books? Success. He discovered the joy of reading voraciously again, using it to fuel his other goals. The best man speeches? Not only a success, but a personal breakthrough, discovering a newfound love for public speaking. 10 dates with Chloe, 13 dates completed. A success that strengthened his most important relationship. But not everything was a perfect win, and the failures are just as instructive as the successes. The goals around the human hacker house and quantified mind were vague and not well specified. As a result, his performance was lackluster. A crucial lesson: you cannot hack the motivation for a goal that is not clearly defined. And then there were the physical challenges. The bench press? He failed to hit his goal of a 60-pound increase, managing only 40 pounds. It was an output goal, something not entirely within his control, but it was still a failure against the metric he set. The 5K? He crushed his previous time, but missed his ambitious goal by an estimated 17 seconds. A near miss, but a miss nonetheless. And the marathon? This was the biggest, most dramatic failure. After successfully running a half marathon at his target pace, he injured his feet. After days of agonizing, consulting experts, and doing a cost-benefit analysis, he made the difficult call not to run the full marathon, fearing serious, long-term injury. It was a huge disappointment, but it taught him a critical lesson about knowing when it's right to abandon a goal, a decision that should be made rarely and only after intense, rational deliberation. And finally, the most ambitious goal of all, to increase his average happiness from 6.3 to 7.3. What happened here? He failed. His average happiness for the 3 months was 6.26, exactly the same as when he had been doing nothing but working. And this is perhaps the most profound and humble conclusion of the book. Nick Winter, the motivation hacker, can teach you how to achieve anything you want. He can give you the tools to build, to learn, to conquer. But he cannot give you the answer to the other half of the equation, figuring out what to want. He ends not with a triumphant declaration of having solved the puzzle of life, but with an honest admission that he is still searching. He gave himself the power to climb any mountain, but he is still learning how to choose the right peaks. Conclusion: to burn always. So what have we learned from this journey into the mind of a hacker? What is the core takeaway from this grand experiment in living? We've learned that motivation is not magic, it's mechanics. It's a system governed by 4 simple variables: your belief in success, expectancy; the reward of the task, value; your susceptibility to distraction, impulsiveness; and the time until the payoff, delay. By systematically turning these dials, you can engineer drive on demand. We've learned that confidence is not a character trait, it's a feedback loop. By building success spirals, stacking tiny, guaranteed wins, you can methodically construct an unshakable belief in your own ability to achieve, rewiring your identity from someone who fails to someone who succeeds. We've learned that willpower is a trap. The wisest path is not to fight temptation head-on, but to make it impossible to fail through the art of pre-commitment. By binding your future self with meaningful consequences, burning your proverbial ships, and using tools like BeMinder, you can guarantee follow-through, transforming anxiety into excitement. And finally, we've learned that life is the ultimate open-world game, and these techniques are the skills that allow you to level up, take on any quest, and become the hero. The motivation hacker doesn't offer a simple, one-size-fits-all answer to happiness. What it offers is something far more valuable: a toolbox and a blueprint. It gives you the freedom to choose your own goals, no matter how audacious, and the confidence that you can and will achieve them. It is a powerful, practical, and deeply honest guide to closing the gap between the person you are and the person you want to be. The book opens with a quote from Walter Pater: "To burn always with this hard, gem-like flame, to maintain this ecstasy, is success in life." Nick Winter's journey teaches us that this flame is not something you find, it is something you build. If this summary has sparked a fire in you, if you feel ready to stop being a passenger and start being the architect of your own life, then your journey is just beginning. Don't stop here. The full depth, the raw data, and the complete story await you. I wholeheartedly encourage you to read The Motivation Hacker in its entirety. Take these tools, pick your missions, and go live a giant's life.